Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
All right, we've been covering the practices and what's been going on so much that we really haven't got a chance to stop and really reassess where we are with the quarterback conversation as this first week of camp truly kind of winds down, and then we roll into the second week of camp, which I will be there for, right? So Friday, Saturday, and Monday. So what I want to talk about in this video, we're going to go through all four quarterbacks. I'm going to talk about what I hope to continue to see out of them, what will give me more excitement about these guys, and what do I think truly could lead to these guys getting on the field fast as far as the rookies are concerned versus what I think could potentially hold them up. Now, first, we kind of have to address Kenny Pickett. I don't know what this Kenny Pickett situation is, right? From the onset, it seems like it is something that's significant, but then I'm hearing people say that it was more about caution and they're just being careful with Kenny Pickett. Here is an absolute line in the sand that I am going to be willing to draw right here, July 30th. I'm recording this video. It's 5:44 p.m. If it becomes clear that the Cleveland Browns basically shelved Kenny Pickett because they were afraid he wasn't going to get to week 1 in order to preserve him as the starting quarterback, which means the Browns just basically gave the job to Kenny Pickett. If that is what the Browns' plan was this offseason, I have lost faith. That is the line in the sand. If we find out that it was going to be Kenny Pickett starting, no competition, they were going to award him the job in a week, it was like, if that's really what they were going to do, and look, I don't know if that's what they were going to do, but if he comes back from this hamstring injury and just takes the job back, I'm not going to feel good about that. I'm going to be honest. Like, if he comes back from a hamstring injury and he has like a week of joint practice or like 2 weeks of practice and he gets the job back, okay, whatever. He won the competition. Sketchy, but whatever. If he does not come back till week 1 and then he's automatically the starter once he's healthy, that is a deal breaker for me. Right? Like, that's it. Because there's a lot of things I can accept. There's a lot of things that I can be understanding of. Because like everybody watching these videos, or at least most people watching these videos, I want the Browns to be good. What I cannot accept is a football team deciding that they can't do better than Kenny Pickett or even try to do better than Kenny Pickett. That is not an acceptable way of going about things. Again, if Kenny Pickett wins the starting job after he comes back from the injury, whatever. I'm not a fan of it. I've made my opinion clear on this, right? I'm not a Kenny Pickett fan. I've never been a believer in Kenny Pickett. I know some people view him as a former first-round pick. I always thought that Kenny Pickett was a third-round pick. I don't see much of a difference between Kenny Pickett and Dylan Gabriel in my eyes. Honestly, I prefer Gabriel. I definitely prefer Shedeur Sanders to Kenny Pickett. So if you want to know where I stand on Kenny Pickett, I'm not a fan. That being said, I still have to be fair. That is my personal bias. I don't think Kenny Pickett's very good. My evaluation of him has been that he's a pretty mediocre quarterback, and there's not much there. But I could be wrong. He could prove it. And if I'm wrong and he plays well for the Browns, I'll just be wrong and the Browns will win games. Okay, I'll deal with it. I'll deal with being wrong. Oh, man, it's so hard. It's not that hard. So that's what my thing is with Kenny. If he comes back from injury, and there's time for him to win the job and he wins the job, okay, whatever. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm going to predict great things for the Browns during that period. But, you know, I'll give it a chance. Just as fair as anybody else, right? But if he gets awarded this job, which means he doesn't even practice for the most part for the rest of camp, and then just gets awarded the starting job, I don't think I trust this team anymore. I don't think I trust Andrew Berry. I don't think I trust Kevin anymore. They would have to be violently right on this Kenny Pickett thing for me to have that trust again. Because that is just a decision that I don't find there's a pathway for it to be competent. And again, I'm being very specific here for anybody who wants to quote me on this. If the Browns, after Kenny Pickett does not practice the entire camp, right? This is a scenario where he doesn't practice the camp. They just award him the job without having to compete for it. If that is what they do with Kenny Pickett, that is my out. That is the line in the sand. I cannot go past that point. That's it for me. I'm telling you this in July. So if they do this in September and I'm standing on this, don't be mad at me. I told you I would do this in July. That's the Kenny Pickett section. Let's talk about Joe Flacco briefly. I don't think anybody clicked on this video to know about Joe Flacco, so I'm not going to waste a ton of time here. Joe Flacco is the de facto here, right? If you got nothing else that you're excited about starting, just throw Joe Flacco out there, dog. That's really it, right? Joe Flacco is that ham sandwich that you keep in your lunchbox and you know you got it there if nobody want to trade for a piece of Lunchable. You know what I mean? Like, nobody trying to take that Snickers and turn it into a piece of Lunchable for you, you know? He is the fallback in my mind. It makes the most sense for him to be the fallback, right? Let's say you're looking at Shedeur Sanders and you're like, hey, I think he looks pretty good, but I don't know if I want to play him early in the season. Well, okay, play Joe Flacco and then throw Shedeur out there, right? Or if you're thinking the same thing with Dylan, you know, unless Dylan and Shedeur show you in training camp that they're going to be like, you know, top 20 starting quarterbacks, there's no reason to rush them out there that first 6 weeks. So if you're at a place where you don't think anybody's jumped out to you, Kenny Pickett's still injured, or maybe he comes back, he still looks mid, then you just play Joe Flacco. Because you know what you got in Joe Flacco, for better or worse. You know it's temporary. You know he's going to give you a good game here or there. You know he's going to be able to run the offense. And you know he's going to be functional but chaotic. But you know what you got there. There's no mystery with Joe Flacco there. So if you can't have Kenny, which I think the Browns really want this Kenny thing to work, I hope they don't want it to work so badly that they're willing to just give him the damn job. But I think they want this Kenny thing to work more than people realize. I hope I'm wrong on that. But yeah, Joe Flacco to me is the de facto. If ain't shit else popping, put Joe Flacco in. If somebody else is looking good and you want to go down to him down the road, who else is better to put in than Joe Flacco? Because you can easily just move on. People expect you to move on. That's the role that Joe Flacco played last year for the Colts. So let's talk about Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. Now, again, I've had to cover these two and what they're doing in practice and some of the discourse around it. So I haven't really been able to just talk about how I feel individually about these two players as prospects. A lot of you who followed my draft coverage and then just show up here after the draft know that I at no point ever had Shedeur Sanders ranked underneath Dylan Gabriel, right? The Browns in the NFL, like, it's this awkward situation where it's like, hey, I think Shedeur is a better prospect than Dylan Gabriel, but the Browns are contradicting that, right? They believe that Dylan Gabriel is a better prospect than Shedeur. I disagree with the Cleveland Browns on that. I think that Shedeur is a better prospect than Dylan. I thought that Shedeur is a solid enough prospect. Now, again, I'm not privy to what happened in pre-draft. I don't know if they're making a big deal out of nothing. I don't know if, they didn't make a big enough deal out of it. I don't know what went into Shedeur's slide. I can have my speculation on what went into the slide. I can have my theories, but at the end of the day, I don't have enough information to act like I know for a fact. So whatever went into his slide is whatever went into his slide, right? And with Dylan Gabriel, it's obvious to me what the Browns value in him is his college experience. I don't know if that's the right move. I understand valuing Dylan Gabriel's college experience to an extent. I've brought it up as a positive of his. I think I had Dylan Gabriel as like a 4th or 5th round pick, which he ended up being a 3rd round pick. So Browns drafted him a little bit earlier, but I had Shedeur as like a late 1st, early 2nd guy, and they got him in the 5th. I was way more excited for the Shedeur selection than the Dylan one, right? It seems jarring to some folks when I say that, because for whatever reason, some Shedeur fans have like singled me out as like this big Shedeur hater. I've been pretty supportive and pretty positive on the guy. I'm just not going to go along with some of these ridiculous narratives. And I'm going to push back on ridiculous bullshit when I see it. And sometimes, a lot of times, Shedeur fans kind of take an inch, run with it a mile, and get mad when you tell them that they tripping. But I've been pretty high on Shedeur throughout this whole process. What we've seen out of Shedeur so far in camp is a quarterback who, let me start over here. So let's talk about the rookies, because I've had to cover this situation as a person who has their own opinions, but also understands that I have to respect the position that the team has clearly taken on these players. Here's what I mean by that. I had a late 1st, early 2nd grade on Shedeur Sanders. Now, I'm not like a draft expert. My grade don't mean shit, but that's what I put the value on, right? Whenever I was doing mock drafts, I was pretty high with taking Shedeur in the 2nd round. I was pretty excited about being able to get him in the 2nd round. And because I wasn't high on this quarterback class in general, I thought this was a pretty weak quarterback class. I'm lower on like Cam Ward than Shedeur. I know Cam Ward went number 1 overall. Me personally would never have taken Cam Ward number 1 overall. I thought that Shedeur was a better prospect than Cam Ward. That being said, I don't think that highly of Cam Ward. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe I'm wrong on Shedeur, but that's just where I am, right? You're asking me for my opinion. That's my opinion, right? And Dylan Gabriel is somebody I thought was more appropriate to take in the 4th round, right? 4th, 5th round. Browns took him with the comp 3rd or late 3rd. So I'm in this awkward position where, me personally, I think Shedeur is a better prospect than Dylan Gabriel. But to do my job, I have to understand that what I feel isn't what the Browns feel all the time, right? I talk about this all the time. I have my opinions, but I have to also check my ego and understand that if I want to predict what the Browns are doing or have any kind of insight on what the Browns are going to do, I have to be able to separate what I would want them to do, what I would do, and what I think from what it is clear that the Browns would want to do and what the Browns think. For example, I think the Browns are way more interested in starting Kenny Pickett than I would ever be. I'm not a big fan of that, but I can't act like that's not the case when my research, my instincts, my intuition points me in that direction. Similar thing happens with Shedeur and Dillon Gabriel. I would be much more interested in seeing Shedeur play than Dillon play. That's me personally. But if I look at the situation from the Browns' perspective, it is obvious that the Browns feel the opposite. They're more interested in seeing Dillon play right now than Shedeur. They see Dillon as somebody who could play now. They see Shedeur as somebody who might be able to play later. That doesn't mean those labels are permanent for these players. Shedeur can play himself into a play now label. Dillon can play himself out of that label. But if I'm separating what I want, what I believe, from what the team wants and the team believes, then that's where we are. They took Dillon Gabriel in the third round. They went back after they got everybody they wanted and then went best player available, who was Shedeur Sanders. That's how this went down. So when I talk about the Browns quarterback situation, I'm trying to analyze it and give you an accurate picture, or at least the closest I feel like I can get to an accurate picture. I can't ignore that. I know that makes people frustrated that I don't choose to ignore that, but that's not giving you the truth, right? That's just giving you what I feel like I want. But that's bullshit. Like, I got to try to give you what's the truth. So that's the awkward situation with this quarterback battle, right? Dillon is the guy they want to play. Dillon is the guy they're giving the first team reps to. Dillon is the guy that they're grooming to play earlier than later. So if you're asking me what Dillon Gabriel has to do to play earlier than later, he has to just win his reps. Now, do I think, and this is where my opinion comes in, that Dillon is going to do that? I go back and forth because, to Dillon's credit, I think he's been better in camp than what I anticipated. He looked awful at the Senior Bowl. I was not impressed at all with Dillon Gabriel at the Senior Bowl. There are some quarterbacks who win the first and second round that I was also not impressed with at the Senior Bowl, but that's another conversation for another day. I was not impressed with Dillon at the Senior Bowl, but what I've seen at practice, and this is why I'm excited to get down there, I want to see when I'm down there at practice if it looks a lot different than it did at the Senior Bowl. Right now, from the videos, it feels like it is a significant improvement. And I think that improvement, on top of the advantage that Dillon Gabriel already has in his competition because he was taken before Shedeur, if he keeps going on that pace, he's probably safe from being usurped unless Shedeur hawks him, basically, right? Like, unless Shedeur kind of doubles his pace right now, it just overtakes him. What Shedeur is, like, I think Shedeur is right on the heels of Dillon Gabriel right now, if, like, we're taking his spot. But Dillon is doing enough to stay afloat. You know, he's not just surrendering in this competition. So Dillon has showed, okay, that the experience, it shows when you watch him. To Dillon's credit, you know, contrary to how I feel about it, Dillon has been a really good quarterback every year he's been a college football quarterback, and that's been 5 seasons of FBS football. He's super experienced, and I know people get mad about that because Shedeur also has experience, but Shedeur has 2 years of Jackson State experience, which is in the SWAC, which is in the FCS. Now, unlike most people who speak on this subject, I'm very familiar with not just the SWAC and the MEAC, but the FCS in general. So I know what level of football that is versus what the FBS offers. And the truth is, it's just a massively different level of competition, right? You know, a really, really good SWAC school that wins the SWAC and gets invited to the Celebration Bowl might get an at-large bid to the FCS playoff. It might be ranked in like the low teens, maybe even like as high as like 12, right? It's really, those conferences in the scope of FCS football are viewed as like mid-majors. So transitioning from a mid-major FCS, and that's no disrespect to HBCU football culture. I love it. I go to games every year. I'm just having a real conversation about where it stands in the totem pole, right? Going from that to Pac-12 football for 2 years. It's not the same as Dillon Gabriel playing 2 years in the American, 1 year in the SEC, and another year in the Big Ten. You can argue when he was in the SEC was the best conference in college football. When he was in the Big Ten was the best conference in college football. And he's played in playoff games where Shedeur Sanders has only played in one bowl game. Well, not one bowl game. You can count the 2 Celebration Bowls that he's been as well, which are FCS postseason games between the MEAC and the SWAC. I actually went to his first Celebration Bowl when Jackson, I believe they played South Carolina State that year. But anyways, I digress. Dillon has played a lot more high-level college football than Shedeur. And you can kind of see it at times because Dillon is a lot quicker to get rid of the ball. But what Dillon does not have is prototypical or even close to prototypical NFL height. I've argued with the shorties in the comment section. You know what I mean? I pissed off. I pissed off my short demographic on this channel, talking about Dillon Gabriel. Right? I got in an argument with y'all about what 5'11" is and what 5'10" is. Homie short. Dillon Gabriel is not a big man. And that's going to be a problem in the AFC North. That's going to be a problem in Cleveland when you're going to have to play in inclement weather. That's going to be a problem in the NFL where everybody's bigger. Offensive linemen are bigger. Defensive linemen are longer, stronger, more athletic. There's a dude like Myles Garrett who could just block your pass. There's a dude like Mason Graham who could just swat your ball in the middle. Like, it's just the level of athlete on the line of scrimmage compared to the NFL, to the college. Even if you go to a great school like Oregon, world of difference. Even if you play in the best conference in college football like the Big Ten was last year, world of difference, right? And that has proven to be difficult for quarterbacks of his height to get through, especially when they're not elite athletes, and Dillon's not an elite athlete. So he has a lot to overcome. I think Shedeur Sanders has significantly less to overcome. And I think you see it when you watch him play, if I'm being honest with you, right? Shedeur's best moments, even though sometimes he is holding on to that ball, even though sometimes he is sacked technically and just allowed to finish the play for the drill's sake, Shedeur's best moments look so effortless compared to Dillon's. Because Shedeur does not have to work through all of these other physical hurdles to play football like Dillon does. And I always bet on the player who has to fight through the least amount of hurdles possible to play football, right? Dillon just simply, to me, has too many. Maybe he's going to be a strong backup, but that's where I think Dillon sits. I think Shedeur could be a starter. I comped him to somewhere between Tua and Teddy Bridgewater before the draft. And I think it's likely that he can end up there if you play your cards right with him. He does need to speed it up. There's times where he holds the football. Luckily or unlucky for Shedeur, he plays in the AFC North, so that habit will be addressed quickly, right? It's only going to take but so many games against Pittsburgh or games against the Ravens for you to understand you ain't got that much time. And I think a lot of Shedeur's fans from Colorado they're in the comment section talking about how Shedeur was able to buy all this time in Colorado. And I respect the enthusiasm on one hand, but understand that this ain't nothing like what he saw at no damn Colorado, dog. This is not just the NFL. This is the AFC North. This is as tough as it fucking gets in the NFL. Like, some folks, it's clear to me they don't watch a lot of NFL football. They don't have a lot of respect for it. You should really get some respect for it, right? Because this ain't what you think it is, right? The gauntlet he gonna have to play in the AFC North. It ain't no damn Iowa State, brother, right? It's much different. Ain't nobody on Iowa State look like some of the dudes he gonna have to play on Sundays. So this idea that he gonna be able to do all the same stuff is not even an idea that I think Shedeur believes in, because when I watch him, it seems like that's one of the main things they've worked on is getting rid of that ball quicker. I still think there's a little bit more work need to be done there, and that work needs to be tested against a live rush. But the potential is obviously there with Shedeur. If he speeds it up and he's able to be on time, he's already an accurate thrower. He's already good at throwing into windows with anticipation. The potential is obvious. He just has to be able to demonstrate a lot of poise, which I think he has so far throughout camp and throughout his draft slide. I got to give him all the credit in the world for that, right? Because he had every reason in the world to crash out during the draft. He didn't. And I think that demonstrated a measure of poise that I find remarkable. That being said, there are some things I still think you want to feel before you put them out there. You can feel good about it and put them out there. I would rather feel excellent about it and then put them out there. I don't want to see another Dorian Thompson-Robinson situation. Again, I think he's a better prospect than Dorian was, given that he's more of a traditional passer in the Kevin Stefanski style than Dorian was. But Dorian looked promising throughout training camp, preseason, and then you threw him out there against Baltimore, and he just never regained his confidence. Now, Shedeur's confidence seems to be much more, for lack of a better word, stubborn, and I mean that in a good way, than somebody like Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Like, it doesn't seem like his confidence is going to be shaken a lot. But still, the NFL finds ways of humbling people, and it sometimes can be pretty brutal. So I just want to make sure if he's showing you that he can speed it up and give you the poise and step up in the pocket and the good footwork, and that he's going to use that accuracy, the anticipatory throwing, and being able to be on time, on target, that means you got something. And when you got something, you don't want to fuck it up. So take your time with it, right? Because if you put Shedeur in a situation where he's not going to succeed, well, then you put yourself in a place where you're not going to be sure. But if you put him in a position to succeed, he succeeds. Well, now you got something real to build off of. So that's how I see the quarterback room. I have some legitimate hope for Shedeur. I just wish people would pump the brakes on him a little bit. And when I say pump the brakes, I don't mean you are going too far if you think that he can eventually start this year for this team. I think that's a reasonable place to be. When I say pump the brakes, I mean, if you're out here talking about how Shedeur is going to win Rookie of the Year, or how Shedeur is going to be a top 10 quarterback already, right? Or you're already talking about quarterbacks with established histories in the NFL that you think Shedeur's better than. That's what I mean by pump the brakes. There is a level of expectation being developed here for this kid that I think is unfair for him. And I don't mean that in he doesn't deserve these expectations. I mean that in you're not even allowing him to earn these expectations. You're just throwing this shit on him. It's unfair. Let his career play out so the expectations come organically with them. That's it. If it's going to happen, if the Browns are going to get lucky, just let it happen. We don't have to be super early on this, because there is consequence to trying to be early on this and being wrong. That's my only thing with Shedeur, right? I don't love the mania around him, but that's not going to affect how I feel about him. Hell, I covered Deshaun Watson fairly, and that was way worse than whatever Shedeur got going on around him, right? Shedeur's fans are a bit annoying at times, but it ain't nothing compared to what I had to deal with Watson, and I was extremely fair on Deshaun Watson. So that's not really going to affect how I view stuff. It's really just is Shador going to continue to build on the positive things that he's done so far? I love the fact that he's not had a heavy interception day of practice so far. That's really good. And I know the coaches are taking a look at that. You know, he hasn't even thrown a lot of turnover-worthy plays from what I could tell. There's some good stuff coming from Shador. And there's reasons for Browns fans to be a little excited. You know, I just don't want us to get carried away to the point to where there's a mania around the guy. And we're putting stuff around him that he's not in the position to deliver on. And then he's left holding the bag. And the next thing we know, everybody's shitting on the kid. But that's kind of how I feel about all the quarterbacks in the Browns room. Haven't really got a lot of time to talk about my opinions on these guys because I've had to talk so much about what I think the Browns are going to do, which is different from what I want them to do sometimes. But that's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.